The grand hall of the Galactic Cultural Exchange stretched higher than most species could see. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds filled the space, their bodies reflecting every color and shape that evolution could create. Some floated, some crawled, some existed as clouds of organized particles. They had all come to share the best of what their civilizations had created. Ambassador Chun stood backstage, watching the presentations through a monitor. The Valorians had just finished their performance. Their crystal sculptures produced sounds that made the air itself seem to sing. The audience had been silent with wonder. Before them, the Mathuri had displayed paintings that lived and breathed, changing colors over the course of centuries. The Zarati had danced, and their movements had made gravity bend and twist in ways that should have been impossible. "They're incredible," said Marcus, the human chef who had joined the delegation. He pressed his face close to the screen. Chun nodded but said nothing. She had seen the pattern. Every species presented their highest achievements, the things that showed how far they had come from their primitive origins. They displayed beauty, advancement, progress. They showed what they had built during times of peace and prosperity. Humanity had tried that approach in the preliminary meetings. They had brought paintings, music, and literature. The other species had been polite but unimpressed. Compared to living art and gravity dances, human achievements seemed ordinary. So Chun had changed tactics completely. "Ambassador Chun," a voice spoke through the communication device in her ear. "You're on in 5 minutes." She straightened her jacket and walked toward the stage entrance. Behind her, 3 dozen humans followed, carrying cases and equipment. None of them were artists in the traditional sense. There were farmers, sailors, engineers, and doctors. There was an old woman who had survived the Australian wildfires. There was a man who had lived through a famine as a child. There was Marcus, who cooked food that people actually wanted to eat. The lights dimmed. Chun walked onto the stage. The murmuring of thousands of aliens filled the air. She could feel their curiosity mixed with something else. Pity, perhaps. The humans were so young, so new to the galactic community. What could they possibly show that would matter? Chun smiled. "We call our presentation the Archive of Endurance," she said. Her voice carried through the hall, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. "We're not here to show you our greatest achievement. We are here to show you how we learned to survive." A holographic display activated behind her. Earth appeared, spinning slowly. Data scrolled across the bottom of the image. "Our planet has experienced 5 mass extinctions," Chun said. "The worst killed 96% of all species living at the time. We've had ice ages that covered most of our world in frozen death. We've had volcanoes that blacked out our sun for years. We've had plagues, floods, droughts, and earthquakes that reshaped entire continents." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. In the audience, beings shifted uncomfortably. Some species came from worlds so stable that their climates hadn't changed significantly in millions of years. "Life on Earth doesn't just survive these things," Chun continued. "It has to, because they keep happening. So every species on our planet, especially humans, had to learn one fundamental skill. We had to learn how to turn catastrophe into opportunity." The display changed. It showed early humans, barely different from apes, huddling in caves. "We started with nothing," Chun said. "No claws, no thick fur, no venom, no armor. We were slow and weak. In a fair fight, almost any predator could kill us. So we learned not to fight fair." The image showed humans creating fire, sharpening stones, and crafting spears. "But that's not the interesting part," Chun said. "Every species learns to use tools. What makes humans different is what happened next." Dr. Sarah Okonkwo walked onto the stage. She carried a small device that projected images around her as she spoke. "I study how humans grow food," she said. And the story of human agriculture is the story of human survival. We didn't invent farming because we were smart. We invented it because we were starving. The display showed early farms, simple and crude. The first farmers actually lived shorter, harder lives than the hunters before them. Sarah continued. Farming was more work, provided less diverse nutrition, and tied people to one place. But it had one advantage. It could feed more people through the bad times. When drought killed the wild plants, we had stored grain. When winter came, we had preserved food. We chose reliability over ease. Next came an Inuit elder named Amaruk. He stood on the stage in traditional clothing and began to speak through a translator. My people live in one of the harshest places on Earth, he said. For months, the sun doesn't rise. Temperatures fall so low that exposed skin freezes in minutes. There is almost no wood, no plants that we can eat, no shelter except what we build ourselves. He gestured, and the display showed the Arctic. Beautiful and deadly. We learned to build homes from snow that could keep us warm in the coldest nights. We learned to hunt seals through tiny holes in ice thick enough to support mountains. We learned to navigate by stars, by wind, by the way snowdrifts form around hidden obstacles. We didn't just survive the Arctic. We made it our home. We raised children there. We created art there. We lived full lives in a place that should have killed us. One by one, humans came onto the stage. A Polynesian navigator explained how his ancestors had crossed oceans in wooden boats, using only the stars, currents, and flights of birds to guide them. A desert nomad described how her people found water in places where satellites detected nothing. A doctor talked about how humans had fought diseases, losing millions of lives but always learning, always adapting, always finding new ways to fight back. The presentations weren't polished or beautiful like the others. They were raw and honest. They showed failure as often as success. They showed humans dying, suffering, struggling. But they also showed humans learning from every disaster, adapting to every challenge, and finding ways to not just survive but to live. Finally, Marcus stepped forward with a simple cooking pot. He built a small fire on stage, something that made the safety monitors alarm briefly until they were overridden. This is called soup, he said, adding water and ingredients to the pot. Almost every human culture has a version of it. You know why? Because soup is what you make when you have almost nothing. Leftover bones, scraps of vegetables, things other people would throw away. You add water and heat, and suddenly you can feed your family. He stirred the pot, and a rich smell filled the front of the hall. We took scarcity and made it delicious. That's what humans do. We don't just endure hard times. We create beauty from them. Our best foods come from poverty. Our greatest stories come from suffering. Our most important innovations come from desperation. Chun returned to the center of the stage as the presentations ended. Every human culture, she said, has cuisine born from scarcity, stories born from darkness, and innovations born from desperation. We don't just survive. We make surviving beautiful. We turn it into art, into tradition, into something worth passing to our children. The hall was silent. Then, crystalline voice in darkness, the Valorian representatives stood. Their crystalline body chimed softly as they moved. You celebrate your suffering? They asked, and their voice held something that might have been horror. Chun met their gaze. No, she said simply. We celebrate that we survived it, and we make sure we're ready for the next disaster that comes. The message reached Earth's embassy 6 months after the cultural exchange. It was marked urgent and came from the Mathuri High Council itself. Ambassador Chun read it 3 times, not quite believing what she was seeing. The Mathuri were dying, not individuals, not a city or region. The entire species faced extinction. Their agricultural worlds, The bread baskets that fed their population of 40 billion were failing. A fungal plague had appeared seemingly from nowhere. It spread through their crops faster than anything they had seen before. Every treatment failed. Every solution made things worse. The Mathuri's best scientists projected complete crop failure within one growing season. After that, mass starvation. The death of a civilization that had existed peacefully for 12,000 years. Chun immediately called for her team. Within hours, they gathered in the embassy's conference room. She displayed the Mathuri's data on the screens around them. "They're asking for our help," she said quietly. Dr. Sarah Okenko leaned forward, studying the images of dying crops. Her expression grew more concerned with each passing second. "This is bad. Really bad. They've lost 40% of their crops already, and it's accelerating. What are they doing about it?" Marcus asked. "Everything," Chun replied. "Pesticides, genetic treatments, field burning, soil replacement. Nothing works. The plague adapts to every treatment within days. And they're asking us because of the exhibition," Sarah said softly. "Because we talked about survival." Chun nodded. The High Counselor's message was brief. She said, "You spoke of turning survival into art. We are now dying. What art can save us?" The room fell silent. The weight of 40 billion lives pressed down on them. "We have to try," Sarah finally said. The human delegation arrived on the Mathuri homeworld 3 days later. Sarah had assembled a team, but it wasn't what anyone expected. There were farmers and agriculturalists, but also chefs, historians, and anthropologists. There were people who specialized in ancient farming techniques, in crop diversity, in food preservation. There was Marcus, who had insisted on coming. The Mathuri scientists who met them were desperate and confused. They had expected Earth's finest minds, advanced technology, miracle solutions. Instead, they got people in work clothes carrying soil testing kits and notebooks. Counselor Meridian of the Third Harvest met them personally. Her skin had paled from stress, and her normally upright posture sagged with exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Our people are beginning to panic. Food riots have started in 3 major cities. We need solutions now. What technologies have you brought?" Sarah set down her equipment bag. "We brought ourselves," she said simply. "And we need you to show us your fields." The next 2 weeks were agony for the Mathuri. The humans did nothing but observe. They walked through dying fields, taking notes. They interviewed farmers about their methods. They sampled soil, studied the plague under microscopes, and asked endless questions. But they implemented no solutions, proposed no treatments, made no attempts to save anything. Meridian found Sarah in a field on the 14th day. The human sat in the dirt, literally digging in the soil with her bare hands, making notes in a worn notebook. "Why aren't you doing anything?" Meridian's voice cracked with stress. "Every day we wait, more crops die. More of my people edge closer to starvation. You said you could help." Sarah looked up, her hands covered in soil. "We are helping. We're learning how you got here. We know how we got here. The plague is a symptom, not a cause," Sarah interrupted gently. She stood and brushed off her hands. "Come with me. I want to show you something." They walked to the edge of the field. Sarah gestured across the vast farmland, thousands of acres stretching to the horizon. Every plant was identical. Perfect rows of the same crop, grown in precisely measured spacing, with optimized irrigation and nutrient delivery. "Your agriculture is perfect," Sarah said. "And that's your problem." Meridian stared at her. "Perfect is a problem?" "You practice monoculture on a scale we've never seen," Sarah explained. "One crop, one variety, grown the same way everywhere. It's incredibly efficient. You probably have the highest yield per acre in the galaxy." "Yes," Meridian said proudly. though her voice was tired. "We've spent millennia perfecting our methods. And you've created a paradise for the plague," Sarah said. "It doesn't have to adapt to different conditions, different plant varieties, different soil types. It just has to learn to eat one thing. Once it does that, it can spread everywhere because everywhere is identical." Meridian's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "But our methods work. They've worked for thousands of years." "They worked until they didn't," Sarah said gently. "That's the problem with perfection. It's fragile." That evening, Sarah presented her team's plan to the Mathuri High Council. The room filled with scientists, politicians, and desperate leaders. Chun stood beside Sarah, ready to support her. Sarah didn't sugarcoat anything. "You need to burn 1/3 of your remaining fields immediately." The room erupted in shouts. "Burn their crops? When they were already starving?" "Let her finish," Chun said loudly, and her voice cut through the chaos. Sarah continued, speaking over the angry murmurs. "The burned fields will create fire breaks to slow the plague spread. More importantly, the ash will change your soil chemistry in ways that make it less hospitable to the fungus." She pulled up images on the display. "Next, we introduce companion planting. We've brought seeds from Earth, hardy plants that can survive your conditions and compete with the plague. They'll change the ecosystem of your fields. The plague won't be able to adapt as quickly." "You want us to plant alien species in our fields?" One of the scientists stood, his voice shaking with anger. "That's insane. You'll contaminate our entire biosphere." "Your entire biosphere is dying," Marcus said bluntly from the back of the room. "Sorry, but it's true." Sarah nodded. "The earth plants we're suggesting are legumes and fungi. They'll fix nitrogen in your soil, which you've been depleting for millennia. They'll also create diversity. The plague will have to adapt to multiple targets instead of one." "And finally," Sarah said, pulling up the last part of her presentation, "you need to completely change how you farm. Crop rotation, mixed planting, leaving some fields fallow. All the things that seem wasteful and inefficient." Meridian stood slowly. "You're asking us to abandon methods that have fed our people for 12,000 years. I'm asking you to adapt," Sarah said, "because your perfect system has failed, and if you don't change, your people will die." The silence was heavy. Finally, Meridian spoke. "If we do this and it doesn't work, we'll have less food than we started with. We'll have wasted our remaining time." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It's a risk. But doing nothing is certain death. This gives you a chance." The vote was close, but desperation won. The Mathuri implemented humanity's plan. Watching 1/3 of their fields burn nearly broke the Mathuri people. Food shortages worsened. Riots intensified. But the humans worked alongside them, showing them how to plant the new crops, how to rotate planting zones, how to create diversity from uniformity. Marcus became unexpectedly crucial. He noticed Mathuri farmers throwing away any produce that showed the slightest imperfection or pest damage. It horrified him. "This is still food," he said, holding up a vegetable that had some cosmetic scarring. "Why are you wasting it?" The Mathuri farmer looked confused. "It's damaged. It's not fit for consumption." "It's perfectly fit," Marcus insisted. "You just have to prepare it differently." He set up demonstrations in the refugee centers where hungry Mathuri gathered. He showed them fermentation, preservation, and creative cooking. He taught them how to eat parts of plants they had always discarded. He showed them that waste was often just food they hadn't learned to prepare. "On Earth," he explained while cooking, "some of our best dishes were invented by poor people making use of everything they had. Nothing wasted, everything valued. That's not just cooking. That's survival." 3 months after the humans arrived, new growth appeared in the burned fields. The companion crops were thriving. The plague was still present, but spreading more slowly, confused by the diversity. 6 months later, the Mathuri harvested their first successful crop since the plague began. It was smaller than their historical yields, but it was food. Real food. Safe food. 1 year after Sarah's team arrived, Meridian visited the fields with her. They walked through crops that looked chaotic compared to the old perfect rows. Different plants grew in mixed patterns. Some areas sat empty, resting. It was messy, redundant, and inefficient. It was also alive. "How did you know this would work?" Meridian asked quietly. Sarah smiled, but it was sad. "We didn't. But Earth has taught humanity a hard lesson. We failed at growing food more times than most species have tried. We've watched crops fail, people starve, civilizations collapse. We've learned that the same thing that makes a system efficient makes it fragile. Diversity is messy. Redundancy seems wasteful. But they're also what keeps you alive when everything goes wrong." Meridian looked across the fields, seeing her world with new eyes. "You really did turn survival into an art." "No," Sarah said. "We just practiced it so many times that we got good at it." The news of the Mathuri miracle spread across the galaxy faster than any message the humans had ever sent. Within months, every species in the Galactic Council knew the story. The Mathuri, facing extinction, had been saved by the strange young species from the Death World. The species that celebrated survival as art. Chun's office became flooded with requests. Delegations arrived daily. Everyone wanted humanity's help. The Serati wanted humans to redesign their city infrastructure. The Valorians wanted to learn disaster preparedness. The Kelthani, a species that had never experienced famine, wanted humans to teach them backup food systems. Chun read through the requests with growing concern. There were hundreds of them, from dozens of species. They all asked for the same thing. "Teach us your methods. Share your survival arts. Help us prepare for disasters we've never faced." "We can't do this," Sarah said, sitting in Chun's office late one night. "We're not miracle workers. We got lucky with the Mathuri. Every situation is different." "They don't understand that," Chun replied. "They think we have secret knowledge. A formula for surviving anything." Marcus, who had stayed on as an unofficial consultant, leaned against the wall. "They're scared. They saw what almost happened to the Mathuri and realized it could happen to them. They want a guarantee." "There are no guarantees," Sarah said. "That's the whole point." Chun stood and walked to her window. Outside, alien ships filled the orbital space around Earth. More arrived every day, carrying delegations seeking humanity's wisdom. "Then we need to tell them that," she said. The Galactic Council called for a full assembly, something that only happened during major crises or historic moments. Every species sent representatives. The massive chamber, designed to hold thousands, was filled beyond capacity. Additional species watched through holographic projection. Chun stood at the central podium. Behind her, Sarah, Marcus, and dozens of other humans waited. The humans who had helped the Mathuri. The survivors of disasters. The farmers, chefs, and storytellers. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on the human ambassador. "Thank you for coming," Chun began. "I know you're here because you want humanity to teach you how to survive. You've seen what we did for the Mathuri, and you want the same help for your people." She paused, letting the expectation build. The answer is no. Confusion rippled through the chamber. Angry murmurs began. Chun raised her hand. "Wait, let me explain. We can't teach you what you want to learn because what you want doesn't exist. You're asking for a guarantee of survival. You want us to make you safe from disaster. We can't do that because safety is an illusion." The murmuring grew louder. Crystalline voice in darkness rose from their seat, their body chiming with agitation. "But you saved the Mathuri. You have knowledge we lack. We do, Chun agreed. But not the knowledge you think. Let me show you something. The display behind her activated. Earth appeared, rotating slowly. This is our home, Chun said. Most of you have never visited Earth. You've read reports, seen images, but you don't understand what it's really like. So let me tell you. The image zoomed in, showing Earth's surface. Hurricanes swirled over oceans. Earthquakes fractured continents. Volcanoes erupted. Earth is a death world, Chun said bluntly. Our planet's climate is swung from frozen ice ball to tropical hothouse. Our continents crash together and tear apart. Our moon is so large that it creates tides powerful enough to reshape coastlines. We have volcanoes that can block out the sun, earthquakes that can level cities, storms that can flatten entire regions. She let the images play, showing Earth's violence in detail. Your worlds aren't like this, she continued. I've seen the data. The Valorian homeworld has the most stable climate in the known galaxy. Your temperature variation across millennia is smaller than Earth's seasonal changes. The Mathuri world is a paradise, gentle and predictable. Even the Serati, who pride themselves on adaptability, evolved on a world where the biggest environmental challenge was moderate rainfall variation. The chamber was silent now. Watching the images of Earth fury, you developed intelligence, culture, and art and comfort, Chun said. That's wonderful. Truly, it is. Your civilizations are older, wiser, and more accomplished than ours. Your technology is centuries ahead of Earth's. Your art is more beautiful. Your philosophy is more refined. She turned to face them directly. But you're fragile, she said. Not because you're weak or stupid, but because you've never had to be anything else. Your worlds didn't force you to be strong. They nurtured you, protected you, gave you time to grow and think and create. Earth gave us none of that. Earth tried to kill us, constantly, in every way possible. Sarah stepped forward to join Chun. I study agriculture, she said. And here's what I've learned from studying your species. Most of you have 10 to 20 major food crops. Earth has over 50,000 plant species that humans eat regularly, and we've domesticated them from every biome on our planet. You know why? Because we had to. When drought killed our wheat, we learned to eat rice. When blight destroyed our potatoes, we switched to cassava. We didn't develop diversity because we were smart. We developed it because if we didn't, we died. Marcus came forward next. I'm a chef. That means I make food people want to eat. Every human culture has dishes invented by poor people, by hungry people, by people who had almost nothing. Soup, bread, fermented foods, preserved meats. These aren't primitive foods. They're survival technology disguised as cuisine. We made starvation delicious because we had to live through it so many times. One by one, humans stepped forward. Each told their story. The Arctic survivor explained how her people had thrived in conditions that would kill most species in hours. The Polynesian navigator described crossing oceans in wooden boats with nothing but stars and currents to guide him. The doctor talked about fighting diseases that had killed millions before humans learned to fight back. Every story was the same in one crucial way. Humans had survived by accepting that disaster was normal, that catastrophe was inevitable, and that the only thing to do was prepare and adapt. When the humans finished, Chung returned to the podium. This is what makes humans different, she said. Not intelligence or technology or strength. It's our relationship with disaster. You see catastrophe as an aberration, something rare and terrible that disrupts normal life. We see it as Tuesday, as the default state of existence. Earth taught us that everything we build will eventually be destroyed. Everyone we love will eventually die, and every solution we find will eventually fail. She smiled. And it was the same smile that had unsettled the assembly during the cultural exchange. And we're okay with that, because we also learned that destruction creates space for new growth. That failure teaches better than success. That being broken gives you the chance to rebuild yourself stronger. We don't just survive disasters. We use them. We learn from them. We make them part of our culture and pass those lessons to our children. A young Sarati scholar, barely old enough to have earned her place in the assembly, stood. Her voice was quiet but clear. How do we learn this? How do we become like you? You can't, Chum said gently. And you shouldn't want to. Being human means carrying trauma that spans millennia. It means knowing deep in your bones that everything is temporary. It means preparing for disasters that might never come. That's not wisdom. It's a scar tissue built up from getting hurt over and over again. She paused, then continued more softly. But you can learn to practice survival. You can train for it, even if you've never experienced it. That's what we can offer you. Sarah stepped forward again. Every species has survival knowledge. You've just forgotten it because you stopped needing it. Somewhere in your history, your ancestors faced hardships. They developed techniques for dealing with scarcity, danger, and uncertainty. Then your civilizations advanced, and you abandoned those old ways as primitive. We're offering the Archive Project, Chun announced. We'll work with any species that wants to participate. We'll help you rediscover your own survival knowledge. The techniques your ancestors used. The old ways that seemed inefficient but were actually resilient. We won't teach you to be human. We'll help you remember how to be yourselves during hard times. Crystalline voice in darkness stood again. Their whole body resonated with emotion as they spoke. Your species frightens us, Ambassador Chun, not because you're violent or aggressive. We know you're not, but because you look at a universe that is slowly dying, growing cold and dark, where entropy will eventually claim everything, and you see that as just another challenge to overcome. You see the heat death of the universe and think, we'll figure something out. Chun's smile widened. We don't see possibility. We see Wednesday. And we'll be ready for Thursday, too. The phrase rippled through the assembly. Translators struggled with the idiom, but the meaning came through. Wednesday wasn't special. It was just another day. Another disaster. Another challenge to face with the same determination. Humans brought to everything. The vote to approve the Archive Project was unanimous. Over the following years, human teams spread across the galaxy. They worked with species to document forgotten knowledge. The Valorians rediscovered songs their ancestors had sung during their world's ice age, techniques for maintaining hope during endless darkness. The Zarati found ancient texts describing how their forebears had dealt with drought. Knowledge considered obsolete after weather control was invented. The Mathuri became the project's strongest advocates. Meridian of the Third Harvest often traveled with human teams, sharing her species story. She spoke at universities and council meetings, showing images of her world's chaotic, diverse farms. We were dying, she would say, because we thought we had perfected survival. We believed our efficiency made us strong. The humans taught us that strength comes from accepting imperfection, from building redundancy, from preparing for failure even when success seems certain. 5 years after the Mathuri miracle, Chun stood in her office on Earth, looking at a holographic display that showed the galaxy. Hundreds of pins marked Archive Project sites. Green indicated projects that had successfully recovered historical survival knowledge. Yellow showed ongoing work. Red marked species that had declined to participate. There were still many red pins. Sarah entered without knocking, a habit she had developed over years of working together. We have a problem. Chun sighed. Problems were constant in their work. Which kind? The philosophical kind. The Kelthani Council sent a formal complaint. They say we're making their population anxious. That teaching disaster preparedness to people who've never experienced disaster is creating unnecessary fear. Chun pulled up the Kelthani file. They were a peaceful species, highly advanced, living on a world so stable that their recorded history showed almost no natural catastrophes. No famines, no plagues, no major disasters of any kind. Their civilization had grown slowly, steadily, peacefully for over 20,000 years. What did our team do? Chun asked. They ran disaster drills. Standard stuff for us, basic earthquake preparedness. Taught people to keep emergency supplies, identify safe spaces in buildings, that sort of thing. Sarah pulled up a report. The Kelthani Council says it's causing widespread anxiety. Parents are scared. Children are having nightmares. The council wants us to stop. Chun read through the complaint carefully. The Kelthani weren't wrong, exactly. For a species that had never experienced disaster, even preparing for one seemed terrifying. Schedule a meeting with their council, Chun said. I'll go personally. 3 days later, Chun stood before the Kelthani High Council. Their chamber was beautiful, all flowing curves and soft colors. Everything about Kelthani architecture suggested harmony and peace. Council Speaker Vental addressed her formally. Ambassador Chun, we appreciate humanity's desire to help. But your archive project is harming our people. We're a peaceful species. We have no history of disaster. Teaching our children to fear catastrophes that will never come is cruel. Chun nodded slowly. May I show you something? She pulled up Earth's history on the chamber's display. But instead of showing disasters, she showed something else. Human children, young ones, going camping with their parents. Learning to start fires, purify water, and build shelters. These are human children, Chun said. They're learning survival skills they will almost certainly never need. The boy learning to start a fire lives in a city with perfect climate control. The girl learning to purify water has access to the cleanest water in human history. They're not preparing for likely disasters. They're learning a mindset. She changed the image to show humans gardening, preserving food, and learning first aid. We teach our children these things not because they'll use these exact skills, but because they need to understand a fundamental truth. Self-reliance is a muscle. If you never exercise it, it atrophies. When disaster finally comes, and it always eventually comes, you won't be able to use it even if you want to. Vental's expression remained troubled. But we don't need those skills. Our systems provide everything. Our technology protects us. From everything? Chun asked quietly. Forever? With absolute certainty. The chamber fell silent. Chun continued, her voice gentle but firm. I've studied your history, Speaker Vental. Your civilization is magnificent. 20,000 years of unbroken peace. It's beautiful, but it's also unprecedented in the galaxy. No other species we've encountered has gone that long without a major catastrophe. She pulled up statistical models. The galaxy has supernova, gamma-ray bursts, rogue planets, colliding stars. There are plagues evolving constantly, asteroids changing course, solar flares that can destroy technology. Your world has been extraordinarily lucky, but luck doesn't last forever. So you're saying disaster is inevitable? Another council member stood, their voice sharp. That we should live in fear? No, Chun said firmly. I'm saying disaster is possible, and preparation isn't fear. It's respect for reality. She changed the display again, showing the Mathuri before and after the plague. The Mathuri thought they had perfected their world. Their systems had worked for thousands of years. When disaster came, it almost destroyed them because they had no practice being uncomfortable, no experience with failure, no cultural memory of hardship. They had optimized away their resilience. Marcus had accompanied Chun to the meeting. He stood now, speaking for the first time. "Can I tell you about my grandmother?" he asked. The council looked uncertain but gestured for him to continue. "She lived through a famine as a child. 60 years ago, Earth, agricultural region. A drought killed the crops. She was 7 years old and spent 2 years hungry. Not starving, but never quite full. Never certain if there would be enough." He smiled sadly. It affected her for the rest of her life. She always kept a pantry full of preserved food. She grew vegetables, even though she lived in a city. She taught all her grandchildren, including me, how to cook using almost nothing. People thought she was paranoid. Why prepare for disasters when modern systems prevented them? Marcus paused. Then I was 25. There was a regional failure. The supply chain broke down for 3 weeks. Nothing serious by historical standards, just a logistics problem. But suddenly, stores had no food. People panicked. There were riots. My grandmother didn't panic, he continued. She invited the neighbors over, fed them from her pantry, taught them how to make bread from stored grain, showed them which plants in the local park were edible. She turned a crisis into a community event because she had practiced being prepared her entire life. He looked at the council directly. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. There's a difference. Vental was quiet for a long moment. But if we teach our children to prepare for disaster, won't they live diminished lives? Always looking over their shoulders, waiting for a catastrophe? Chun shook her head. Human children who learn survival skills don't live in fear. They live with confidence. They know that if something goes wrong, they have tools to handle it. That knowledge is freeing, not limiting. She pulled up one more image. It showed humans engaging in what looked like recreational disaster preparation. People practicing emergency drills, but smiling. Children learning to tie knots and filter water, treating it as a game. Adults preserving food and treating it as a social event. We don't make survival grim, Chun explained. We make it normal. Part of life. Like exercise or education. You don't exercise because you expect to be chased by predators. You exercise because it feels good to be capable. Survival practice is the same. Sarah joined them at the front of the chamber. The archive project isn't about making people afraid. It's about helping them remember that they're not helpless, that they have agency even when systems fail. Every species has this knowledge buried somewhere in their past. We just help you find it again. The council debated among themselves for several minutes. Finally, Vental spoke again. What if we allowed the archive project to continue, but only for adults who voluntarily choose to participate? Would that be acceptable? Chun considered it. It's a start, but I'd ask you to think about this. Why is it cruel to teach children they're capable of handling difficulties, but not cruel to teach them they're completely dependent on systems that might fail? She let that question hang in the air. We'll compromise, she finally said. We'll adjust our methods for the Kelthani. Make it gentler, less urgent. Frame it as historical education rather than disaster preparedness. But we won't stop teaching that preparedness itself is valuable. The council agreed, reluctantly. As Chun and her team left the Kelthani homeworld, Sarah looked troubled. This is going to keep happening.